I don't think Santa will find us anymore, Mommy. Those 7 simple words, spoken by 6-year-old Ethan Miller in the dimly lit corner of his mother's workplace, would change everything. They weren't just the innocent observation of a child, they were the words that would crack open the hardened heart of James Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises and self-proclaimed businessman first, human second. If this story already has you feeling something, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity, especially during the holiday season. The December wind howled outside the towering glass building of Harrington Enterprises, carrying snowflakes that danced and swirled before settling on the ground. Inside, the corporate headquarters buzzed with year-end activities, holiday preparations, and the constant pressure of fourth-quarter targets. Sarah Miller hurried through the lobby, her worn coat pulled tightly around her slender frame. At 32, her face already showed lines of worry that belonged to someone much older. Behind her trailed Ethan, his small hand clutched in hers, his other arm wrapped around a tattered backpack. "Remember what I told you, sweetie? You need to be very quiet while Mommy finishes her work," Sarah whispered, bending down to his level. "Just a few hours, and then we'll go home." Ethan nodded solemnly, his large brown eyes understanding far more than a child his age should. "I brought my dinosaur book and my crayons," he said, patting his backpack. "I'll be super quiet, like a ninja." Sarah smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. This wasn't how she wanted to spend the evening with her son, but the babysitter had cancelled last minute, and Sarah couldn't afford to miss work. Not when she was already behind on rent and utilities. Not when Christmas was just 2 weeks away, and she had barely managed to put aside enough for one small gift for Ethan. As an executive assistant at Harrington Enterprises, Sarah was responsible for managing James Harrington's impossibly demanding schedule. The job paid better than her previous positions, but the hours were long and unpredictable. Tonight, James had requested she stay late to prepare for an important board meeting the following morning. "Mrs. Miller, you're cutting it close," James's cold voice greeted her as she stepped off the elevator. At 45, James Harrington was at the peak of his career. Tall, impeccably dressed, with salt and pepper hair that only added to his authoritative presence, he was known for his brilliant business mind and his complete lack of patience for personal matters. "I apologize, Mr. Harrington. My childcare arrangements fell through, and I..." James's eyes narrowed as he noticed Ethan partially hidden behind Sarah's legs. "This is a workplace, not a daycare center," he said sharply. "I need those reports compiled and the presentation finalized by tonight." "Yes, sir. I understand. Ethan will be no trouble at all, I promise." James didn't respond, merely turning on his heel and walking back toward his office, his disapproval hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. Sarah settled Ethan at a small table in the corner of her workspace, setting up his books and crayons. "Just for a little while, okay?" she whispered, kissing the top of his head. The hours ticked by slowly. Sarah worked frantically, her fingers flying over the keyboard, her mind racing to meet James's exacting standards. Occasionally, she would glance over at Ethan, who remained true to his word, quietly coloring or reading his dinosaur book. At around 8 o'clock, Sarah noticed Ethan staring out the large window beside her desk. The city lights twinkled below, and snow continued to fall, transforming the urban landscape into something magical. "Mommy," Ethan whispered, his breath fogging the glass. "Will we have a Christmas tree this year?" Sarah's hand stilled on the keyboard. Last year, they had managed a small artificial tree from the thrift store, but even that had been sold during the summer when bills piled up after Sarah lost her previous job. "I'm not sure, sweetie. Trees are expensive, and we need to be careful with our money right now." Ethan nodded, his reflection in the window showing a maturity beyond his years. "That's okay. I told my teacher we might not have Christmas this year because we moved so much. She said Santa knows where all the children live." Sarah felt her heart constrict. They had moved 3 times in the past year, each apartment smaller than the last, each neighborhood a little less safe. Their current place was a single room with a kitchenette in a building with unreliable heat and suspicious neighbors. "Of course Santa knows where we live," Sarah assured him, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Ethan turned from the window, his eyes serious. "But I've been thinking, Mommy. I don't think Santa will find us anymore. Not after we had to leave our house with the red door. I think maybe he's lost our address." Unknown to both of them, James Harrington had emerged from his office and was standing just beyond the doorway, about to demand an update on the presentation. The child's words stopped him cold. "Why do you think that, Ethan?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "Because last year I asked for a warm coat and new shoes, and he didn't bring them. And I was good, Mommy, I promise. So I think maybe he just couldn't find us. And now we've moved again, and our building doesn't even have our name on the mailbox because Mr. Grady said it costs extra." James remained frozen in place, the stack of papers in his hands suddenly feeling insignificant. He had never paid much attention to the personal lives of his employees. People were resources, assets to be utilized efficiently. Their problems were their own, not his concern. But something about the boy's matter-of-fact acceptance of his circumstances pierced through James's carefully constructed walls. "Santa will find you," Sarah insisted, pulling Ethan into a hug. "He has special magic." Ethan pulled back, his small face serious. "It's okay if he doesn't, Mommy. I don't need presents. I just want us to be together and for you not to cry at night when you think I'm sleeping." James felt as though he'd been struck. He had never considered that his demanding expectations might have consequences beyond the office. He had never thought about Sarah Miller as anything other than an efficient assistant who occasionally needed to be reminded of her priorities. He stepped back quietly, returning to his office without making his presence known. For the first time in years, the quarterly reports and market projections couldn't hold his attention. Instead, his mind kept returning to the boy's words and the quiet dignity with which both mother and son faced their circumstances. After an hour of distracted attempts at work, James found himself standing at his office window, looking out at the snow-covered city. His own childhood had been privileged, with Christmases overflowing with gifts and elaborate celebrations. Even now, his penthouse apartment would be professionally decorated for the holidays, though he rarely spent enough time there to appreciate it. What did he really know about the lives of people like Sarah Miller? People who worked just as hard as he did, but for whom success meant simply keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table? Making a sudden decision, James reached for his phone. Meanwhile, Sarah had finally completed the presentation. Ethan had fallen asleep on the small couch in the corner, his dinosaur book still open on his chest. She gently closed the book and covered him with her coat, then gathered the completed files to deliver to James's office. She knocked softly on his door, surprised to find it partially open. "Mr. Harrington? I've finished the presentation and compiled all the reports you requested." James was sitting at his desk, his expression unreadable. "Come in, Mrs. Miller." Sarah entered cautiously, placing the files on his desk. "Is there anything else you need before I leave?" "How long have you worked for me, Mrs. Miller?" The question caught her off guard. "Almost 10 months, sir." "And in that time, have I ever asked about your personal circumstances?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "No, sir. And I appreciate that. I don't bring my personal problems to work." "Perhaps that's been a mistake on my part," James said quietly. "Please, sit down." Confused, Sarah perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, her body tense with anticipation. Was she about to be fired for bringing Ethan to the office? "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with your son earlier," James began. "About Santa not finding you." Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry about that, Mr. Harrington. I assure you it won't happen again." Ethan is usually with my neighbor after school, but she had a family emergency, and I couldn't find anyone else on such short notice. James held up a hand to stop her explanations. That's not why I mentioned it. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words, something Sarah had never witnessed before. Mrs. Miller, Sarah, I realize I know very little about you beyond your capabilities as an assistant. Would you mind telling me about your situation? Sarah hesitated, years of keeping her struggles private making her reluctant to share. But something in James's expression, a genuine interest she had never seen before, made her decide to take a chance. There isn't much to tell, she began softly. My husband left shortly after Ethan was born. No child support, no contact. I've worked various administrative jobs, but it's been difficult finding something stable that also allows me to be there for Ethan. Before coming here, I was let go from my previous position when the company downsized. We lost our apartment because I couldn't make rent, and we've been moving to increasingly cheaper places ever since. James listened intently, his expression thoughtful. And your current living situation? Sarah looked down at her hands. We have a single room in a building on the east side. It's not ideal, but it's what I can afford right now while trying to save enough for a security deposit on a better place. And Christmas? Sarah's smile was sad. Christmas will be small this year. Ethan understands. He's always been good about understanding. No child should have to understand that Santa can't find them, James said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. No child should have to worry about their mother crying at night. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with the realization that James had heard more than she thought. I've made some calls, James continued, opening a drawer in his desk. I own several properties throughout the city, including a small apartment building not far from here. There's a 2-bedroom unit available immediately. He slid a set of keys across the desk. It's yours if you want it. Sarah stared at the keys in disbelief. Mr. Harrington, I can't possibly. The rent will be reasonable and within your current salary, he interrupted. This isn't charity, Sarah. It's an acknowledgement that I've been oblivious to the challenges faced by the people who work for me. People who contribute to my success every day. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. I don't know what to say. There's more, James said, sliding an envelope across the desk. The company has a family assistance program that I've admittedly never paid much attention to. You qualify for retroactive benefits that should have been offered to you when you were hired. This check represents those benefits. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The amount inside was more than enough to furnish their new apartment and provide a proper Christmas for Ethan. Why? She whispered, unable to comprehend this sudden change in the man she had known only as a demanding, often cold employer. James was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the door where Ethan could be seen still sleeping on the couch. Because your son's words made me realize I've forgotten something important. Business success means nothing if we lose our humanity in the process. He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. The apartment is available immediately. Take tomorrow off to move in and get settled. I've arranged for a moving company to help you. They'll be at your current address at 9 a.m. Sarah rose on shaky legs, clutching the keys and envelope. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I don't know how to repay you for this. Just make sure Santa finds your son this year, James replied with the first genuine smile Sarah had ever seen from him. And perhaps, if you're willing, I'd like to learn more about how we can better support the families of all our employees. That night, as Sarah carried a sleeping Ethan to the taxi James had called for them, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope, not just for Christmas, but for their future. 2 weeks later, on Christmas morning, Ethan woke in his new bedroom, surrounded by walls painted a cheerful blue. He raced to the living room where a real Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights twinkling, presents spilling out from underneath. Mommy! Mommy! Santa found us, he shouted, jumping onto Sarah's bed. He really found us. Sarah hugged him tightly, her heart full. Of course he did, sweetie. I told you he had special magic. What Ethan didn't know was that the real magic had happened when his innocent words had penetrated the armor around James Harrington's heart. The man who had once prided himself on being businessman first, human second, had discovered that true success came from remembering our shared humanity. That Christmas became the first of a new tradition at Harrington Enterprises. James established a comprehensive family support program for all employees, ensuring that no child in their extended corporate family would ever worry about Santa finding them again. And each year, at the company Christmas party, James would tell the story of how a little boy's words, "I don't think Santa will find us anymore," had reminded him of what truly mattered in life. Sometimes, the most profound changes come from the simplest truths, spoken by those who see the world with unclouded eyes. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can receive is the opportunity to rediscover our own capacity for compassion. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. In a world that often seems divided, let's remember that we all have the power to be the miracle someone else is praying for, not just at Christmas, but every day of the year.